The cabin went dead silent. At 10,000 feet, the pilot's head slumped forward, hands limp on the yoke. A scream tore through the cockpit, and before anyone could move, a trembling 16-year-old girl pushed past the passengers and whispered, "I can fly it, just trust me." Ava Morgan didn't even want to be on this flight. It was supposed to be a simple trip. Denver to San Diego, a short weekend with her mom before senior year. But the moment she stepped into the narrow cabin of Flight 189, her chest tightened. Not from fear, from familiarity. The smell of jet fuel. The hum of engines. The flicker of light through the oval windows. It all reminded her of him. Her father, Captain Reed Morgan, Air Force test pilot, daredevil, legend, and gone for 5 years. He'd taught her everything about airplanes before she could even drive. He'd sit her in front of the simulator at the base hangar, voice calm, patient, proud. "Throttle's your heart, kiddo. The yoke's your mind. One controls speed, the other keeps you steady. What about fear?" she'd asked. "That's your co-pilot. You don't ignore it. You learn to fly with it." Now, sitting in seat 8A, Ava pressed her forehead to the cold glass and watched the ground crew move beneath the wing. The aircraft, a twin-engine commuter jet, wasn't much to look at, but she found beauty in every switch, every rivet. "Still dreaming about flying?" her mom asked softly, buckling in beside her. Ava smiled faintly. "Always," her mom sighed. "You know what your counselor said. Aviation's not exactly a teenage plan," Ava shrugged. Neither was Dad's life. The engines began to spin up. A smooth, deep vibration filled the cabin. Passengers murmured, adjusting seatbelts, scrolling phones, sipping coffee. The air felt routine, ordinary, the kind of flight no one remembers. But Ava always paid attention. She counted seconds during taxi. Listened to the rhythm of thrust as the aircraft lined up on the runway. When the engines roared, she mouthed the numbers her father used to whisper, "V1. Rotate." The plane lifted clean off the ground, and for a few blissful minutes, the world below became a watercolor of clouds and gold. She closed her eyes and imagined her father's hand on her shoulder. He'd be smiling. Proud. "See? Told you you'd belong up here one day." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Smooth air ahead. We'll reach cruising altitude in about 10 minutes. Sit back and relax." The seatbelt sign chimed off. The attendants moved through the aisle, polite smiles and coffee trays. Ava sipped ginger ale, sketching a small Cessna in her notebook. But halfway through drawing the tail, she noticed something, a flicker from the cockpit door. It opened slightly. The co-pilot stepped out, pale, wiping his forehead. "Everything okay?" an attendant asked quietly. He nodded stiffly, but his eyes looked wrong, glazed, unsteady. He stumbled past them, vanishing into the lavatory. Ava frowned. Her father always said pilots never leave the cockpit together at altitude. Rule number 1, someone always stays at the controls. She brushed it off until the plane hit a pocket of turbulence hard enough to jolt her drink across her lap. Ava wiped it away, heart racing. The co-pilot still hadn't returned. Then came a faint sound through the thin cockpit door, like a muffled thud. The flight attendant closest to the front froze, glancing toward the cockpit. The intercom stayed silent. Ava's instincts flared. Something wasn't right. The attendant rushed forward, tapping the door, calling, "Captain?" No response. Another knock, louder this time. Still silence. Then from inside, a sharp metallic clang. Passengers turned. The engines hiccuped just for a second. Ava's mom gripped her hand. "It's just turbulence," she whispered. But Ava's eyes stayed fixed on the cockpit door, the one place in the world that suddenly felt both impossibly close and terrifyingly far. Somewhere inside that room, the routine flight was ending, and a story no one would believe was just beginning to take off. The first scream came from the back of the plane. It wasn't fear, not yet, just surprise, the kind that makes people look up from their phones in irritation. But then another voice shouted, sharp and panicked, "The plane's dropping." Ava's heart slammed against her ribs. Through the window, the horizon tilted. Clouds shifted upward. No, they weren't shifting. The jet itself was banking too far left, dipping unnaturally. The seatbelt sign blinked back on with a loud ding. A calm female voice tried to hide the tremor. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your..." Then the intercom cut out. Ava looked toward the cockpit again. The door was still shut. The flight attendant, the older one with the blue scarf, was pounding on it now. Captain, please respond. Still no answer. Ava's mom grabbed her wrist. What's happening? Ava couldn't look away. She'd spent her life studying aircraft, watching hundreds of cockpit recordings with her father. Every instinct in her screamed the same thing. The controls were unmanned. The attendant turned to the cabin, voice breaking. Is there anyone on board with flying experience? A pilot? Dozens of faces turned blankly, frozen. No one moved. The plane lurched again, hard this time, and a tray of drinks exploded across the aisle. Children began to cry. Someone prayed out loud. The engines howled, straining. Ava's pulse hammered in her ears. Her father's words echoed. You don't wait for heroes, kiddo. You become one. Before she could think, she was unbuckling her seatbelt. Ava, her mom gasped, grabbing her arm. Stay here. Please, Mom. She slipped past the rows, steadying herself against the swaying cabin walls. The older flight attendant was near tears, still banging on the cockpit door. Move aside, Ava said, trying to sound calm. The attendant blinked. Honey, go sit down, it's not safe. Ava pointed to the emergency latch. That's a reinforced door, but it's got an override on the inside hinge. If the pilot passed out, we can't wait. The attendant hesitated, but the plane dipped again and passengers screamed. That was enough. She fumbled for the emergency key. Ava helped her twist the latch, and together they forced the door open. The moment it swung inward, cold air hit them like a slap. The cockpit lights flickered red and amber. The captain slumped forward in his seat, oxygen mask dangling uselessly. The co-pilot was half-conscious on the floor. Pale and gasping, Ava's stomach dropped. The control yoke was nudged slightly forward, just enough to send the nose drifting downward. The altitude alarm wailed. Pull up. Pull up. The attendant froze. Oh my God. Ava's brain clicked into autopilot. Everything her father had taught her firing at once. Get him out of the way, she said, pulling herself into the left seat. We're losing altitude, the attendant stammered. Do you know what you're... I've trained on simulators since I was 10. Ava snapped. Just trust me. She gripped the yoke. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes stayed fixed on the gauge's altimeter. 14,000 feet and dropping. Speed, climbing too fast. She eased the throttle back just a little, then pulled gently on the yoke. The nose began to level. The horizon returned to the window, screams. Softened to gasps. For the first time in minutes, the plane stopped falling. The attendant whispered, How did you... Ava didn't answer. She was already scanning the radio panel, flipping switches she only knew from her father's simulator. Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 189, she said into the mic, voice trembling. Captain unresponsive. Co-pilot incapacitated. I have partial control. Static. No reply. She tried again. Mayday, anyone reading this? I need immediate guidance. Then a crackle of sound came through. Flight 189, this is ATC Seattle Center. Who am I speaking to? Ava's throat tightened. Ava Morgan. 16 years old. How I'm flying the plane. Silence. Then in a stunned voice. Say again. Did you say 16? Ava's hands trembled over the controls. Yes, sir. And I need to keep us alive. Inside Seattle Air Traffic Control. The air was usually calm. Quiet voices, steady screens. The rhythmic hum of radar sweeps. But not now. Every controller in the room had turned toward one frequency. Headsets buzzed. Fingers froze mid-typing. Say again, Flight 189. This is Ava Morgan. 16 years old. I'm at the controls. The pilot and co-pilot are both unconscious. A pause, heavy, disbelieving. Then a low murmur rippled through the control room. 16? Someone whispered. Is this a prank? The senior controller, Dan Morales, leaned forward, adjusting his mic. He'd handled mid-air emergencies before, but nothing like this. Ava, this is Seattle Center. Copy that you're in control of Flight 189. Do you have any flight experience? Ava took a shaky breath, eyes darting between gauges. Only simulators, sir. My dad was an Air Force pilot. He taught me everything he could. Dan's hand clenched his mic. All right. Then let's use that, okay? You're doing great. What's your current altitude? Ava glanced at the altimeter. 13,800 and holding steady. The relief in Dan's chest was short-lived. On his radar, a storm front was forming just west of their path. Thick, dark and unavoidable. Ava, listen carefully. You're entering a low-pressure front. We'll need to get you under the clouds soon. But first, I need you to keep that jet level. Ava nodded even though he couldn't see her. Her knuckles were white against the yoke. Copy. Level flight. Behind her, the cabin was chaos. Passengers whispered and prayed. Her mother clutched the back of the cockpit chair, tears streaming. Ava, baby, please. Ava didn't look back. Mom, I need quiet right now. She kept her breathing steady just like her dad taught her. One breath at a time. Fear flies co-pilot. Don't fight it, fly with it. Outside, the world had turned gray. Heavy clouds swallowing sunlight. The plane trembled slightly in crosswinds, but she held firm, adjusting the trim the way she remembered from the simulator. Dan's voice came back through the headset. Calm but tight. You're doing incredible. Ava, you said your dad was a pilot. What was his name? Her throat tightened. Captain Reed Morgan. He flew experimental aircraft for the Air Force. The room behind Dan went silent. One of the younger controllers looked up from his screen, eyes wide. Wait, Reed Morgan? The one from the Ghost Hawk project? Dan's eyes flicked toward him, recognition dawning. He covered his mic. Get me Air Force Command, now. Meanwhile, Ava's mom gasped softly. They know your father, Ava. Focus, Ava whispered. We'll talk after I land this. The storm hit like a wall. Lightning flashed to their right, thunder booming through the cabin. The aircraft rocked violently. Ava gritted her teeth, tightening her grip. Seattle Center, I'm in turbulence. Instruments are jumping. You're okay, Ava. Small corrections. Don't overcompensate. Just trust the wings. You're built to ride the storm. The plane dipped, just for a second, but she caught it, pushing throttle gently, leveling again. Behind her, passengers clapped instinctively, tears of relief spilling down faces. Someone whispered, She's just a kid. Dan Morales exhaled slowly, removing his headset for a moment. He turned to his deputy. Patch me through to Air Force Command. Now, if this girl's who she says she is, we're not just dealing with a civilian. We're dealing with Reed Morgan's daughter. Back in the cockpit, Ava stared through the rain-slick windshield, voice trembling but firm. Seattle Center, request heading to nearest clear airspace. I can hold it steady, but I can't do this alone. Dan's voice returned. Quiet but unwavering. You're not alone. Ava, not anymore. He hit the intercom, broadcasting to the entire emergency line. Everyone, we have a 16-year-old flying a passenger jet through a storm. Her name is Ava Morgan. Let's get her home. By the time the Air Force joined the line, Flight 189 was fighting for its life. Rain hammered the windshield. Static hissed in the headset. Ava could barely hear herself breathe. Seattle Center, this is Lieutenant Colonel James Arden, U.S. Air Force. We're patched in. Who's the pilot? Dan Morales exhaled with relief. Sir, it's not a pilot. It's a 16-year-old Ava Morgan, daughter of Reed Morgan. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Reed's daughter? Ava's voice cut in through the storm's roar. I'm here. I've got partial control, but my altitude's unstable. Co-pilot's unconscious. We're running on auto-stabilizer only. Copy that, Ava, Arden said, tone shifting from shock to command. You said your father was Captain Reed Morgan? Yes, sir. Then you already know more about flying than half my pilots. Listen carefully, and we're going to bring you home using something your father helped create. Ava blinked through the raindrops streaking the glass. What do you mean? Your dad worked on a classified system, codename Ghost Hawk Protocol. It was designed for manual override when cockpit automation fails. He never finished it, but he taught you enough to replicate its controls. Dan Morales leaned closer to his mic. Colonel, you're saying she can fly this plane manually through the storm? If she remembers the calibration patterns, yes. Ava's pulse raced. He showed me once and in the simulator 3 years ago. Said it was too advanced for the Air Force to approve. Good, Arden said, because you're about to use it. Lightning flashed again, white and brutal. The plane shuddered. The co-pilot groaned faintly from the floor. Ava's mother whispered a prayer behind her. Okay, Ava, Arden said, voice steady, authoritative. You're going to bypass your left autopilot servo. Reach under the throttle. You'll find a small red switch cover. Ava's fingers trembled as she searched. Got it. Flip it. That'll release your mechanical yoke tension. She did. The yoke loosened slightly. Now more responsive but heavier. Now stabilize on bearing 240. Keep your pitch at +2 degrees. We're guiding you out of the cell. The plane jolted again. Rain poured harder. Ava's hands were slick with sweat. I can't see anything, she shouted. Trust your instruments, not your eyes, Arden replied firmly. Blue above, brown below, and that's horizon balance. Don't chase the nose, just feel the motion. Ava gritted her teeth and adjusted. Slowly, the shaking steadied. The artificial horizon held level. Dan whispered, She's doing it. In the Air Force Command Center, screens showed Flight 189 emerging from the densest storm band. The readings were rough, but holding. Altitude stable at 11.5, a tech reported. She's flying the damn thing, Arden murmured. Ava's voice crackled through the line. Sir, my left engine's giving low output. Copy. That's just moisture in the intake. She'll recover. Focus on keeping your trim stable. Ava swallowed hard. Colonel, why did my dad build Ghost Hawk? What was it for? It was for moments exactly like this, Arden said quietly. When every system fails, and you're down to one person's instinct. The word instinct hit her like lightning itself. That's what her father always said. Technology's smart, Ava. But instinct, that's where the human edge lives. The clouds began to thin. A dull golden light seeped through the gray. The altimeter ticked upward again, 12,000 and climbing. Dan Morales nearly laughed in disbelief. She's through the worst of it. But Arden's tone turned grim. Not yet.
She's clear of the storm, but she's running low on fuel.
She'll never make Seattle. We need an emergency field. Dan checked the radar. Closest is McCord Air Force Base, 40 miles southwest. Perfect, Arden said. We'll guide her in. Ghost Hawk's about to make its first real landing. Back in the cockpit, Ava wiped her eyes, smiling faintly through tears. You hear that, Dad? She whispered under her breath. Your system works. The clouds finally broke, and sunlight spilled across the cockpit. For a moment, Ava just stared. The gray haze that had swallowed them for nearly an hour was gone. Below, endless forests and winding rivers shimmered gold beneath the dying storm. She could breathe again. Seattle Center, I've got visual, she said, voice breaking with relief. Copy that, Ava, Dan Morales replied. We see you too. You're clear of the storm cell. But another voice cut in, firmer, clipped with military precision. Flight 189. This is McCord Air Force Base. We have you on radar. Bearing 240, 29 miles out. I repeat, 29 miles. We're preparing emergency runway clearance. Copy, McCord, Ava said, swallowing. Request landing instructions, and roger that. Maintain altitude at 8,000, heading direct 235. You'll see runway lights in approximately 6 minutes. Can you handle descent manually? Ava glanced at the gauges. The fuel warning flickered amber. Sir, I'll have to. The radio went silent for a beat. Then came the reply, steady and low. Then let's finish what your father started. Her mom's hand rested on her shoulder. You don't have to do this, sweetheart. Ava shook her head, voice calm. If I don't, nobody lands this plane. She eased the throttle back. The engine softened to a low growl. The aircraft dipped gracefully, nose tilting toward the shimmering field far ahead. Inside McCord's control tower, a crowd had gathered, military personnel, engineers, even the base commander. A trembling corporal whispered, Sir, you're saying the pilot is 16. The commander nodded grimly. Reed Morgan's daughter. Every radar screen, every frequency, every eye was locked on Flight 189. Ava's heart pounded. But her hands were steady. 5 miles out. Runway lights blinked faintly through the mist. McCord, I've got visual on the field. Good girl, Arden's voice said in her ear. Winds light 5 knots east. Keep your descent gentle. Pitch -2. Speed 150. Ava's eyes darted across the panel, adjusting everything she could remember. Flaps, set to 30, landing gear. Green lights down. Throttle. Steady. You're lined up perfectly, Arden said. Stay focused. Don't flare too early. The passengers were silent. Even the crying children had gone still, sensing something sacred. A heartbeat shared by 200 souls and one teenage girl. Ava's mom whispered, You can do this, baby. Just like the simulator. Ava smiled faintly. Yeah, only this time. It's real. She felt the plane sink lower, trees rushing beneath. Altitude 800. 600. 400. Ease back now, Arden's voice urged. Let the wheels kiss the ground, not fight it. The runway raced toward them, black gleaming, terrifyingly fast. Ava pulled the yoke gently. The engines whined. The nose lifted slightly, thump. The wheels hit the ground, one then the other. The plane bounced once, then rolled true. Ava eased the throttle down, tapped the brakes, and the aircraft slowed in a clean, perfect line. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. Then the roar, screams, sobs, cheers filled the cabin. Passengers unbuckled, hugging, crying, shouting her name. Ava slumped forward, tears blurring her vision. Seattle Center. She whispered into the radio, voice trembling. Flight 189 has landed safely. The radio crackled and Dan Morales' voice broke through, unsteady. You did it, Ava. You actually did it. From the McCord Tower, Arden's voice came one last time. Proud. Reverent. Ghost Hawk 1. Welcome home. Ava froze. Ghost Hawk 1? That's your father's call sign, Arden said softly. And now it's yours. Her mother's hand found hers. Trembling, he'd be so proud. Ava. Ava smiled through the tears, staring out at the bright, endless runway and the one her father had once dreamed of landing on himself. I know, Mom, she whispered. He was with me the whole way. The runway was still steaming from the rain when the emergency crews reached the aircraft. Engines quiet, lights flickering, and a 16-year-old girl sitting motionless in the captain's chair, tears on her cheeks, hands still gripping the yoke. Firefighters rushed up the stairs. Paramedics pushed through the crowd of shaken passengers. But when they reached the cockpit, they all stopped. She wasn't crying from fear anymore. She was crying because she'd done it. Miss, a medic asked gently, are you Ava Morgan? Ava nodded weakly, voice trembling. Is everyone okay? Everyone's alive, the medic said softly. Because of you. The words hit harder than the storm ever had. Her mom appeared in the doorway, eyes red, face trembling between disbelief and pride. She pulled Ava into her arms, whispering over and over, You brought us home. You brought us home. By the time they stepped off the plane, news cameras were already there. Word had spread like wildfire across every frequency. Every channel teenage girl lands passenger. Jet after pilot's collapse, daughter. A fallen test pilot saves 212 lives. The story broke global within the hour. Reporters shouted. Questions. Were you scared? How did you know what to do? Who taught you to fly? Ava said little. She just looked up at the gray clouds parting above McCord Field and whispered. My dad did. Inside the base operations room, Colonel Arden stood quietly at the window, watching her through the glass. Dan Morales, still pale from the ordeal, walked in beside him. She's something else, Dan said softly. Arden nodded. She's her father's legacy. He pulled out an old photo. Captain Reed Morgan standing beside an experimental aircraft with the Ghost Hawk insignia. The resemblance was unmistakable. She completed what he started, Arden murmured, and she didn't even need the tech. She just needed instinct. Dan smiled faintly. He trained her well. No, Arden said, shaking his head. He raised her right. 2 days later, Ava sat alone on the base tarmac, watching maintenance crews tow the battered jet away. Her mom approached quietly, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. You've barely slept, she said. Ava smiled tiredly. Neither have they. She nodded toward the hangar where reporters still buzzed. Her mom sat beside her. They want to give you a medal, you know. Maybe even an honorary flight license. Ava sipped her coffee. I don't want medals. What do you want? She looked toward the sky, still streaked with orange and blue. I want to fly again. For real this time. Her mom blinked back tears. Just like your father. Ava smiled softly. No, like me. The news never stopped running the story. Every outlet replayed the moment of touchdown. Every paper carried the photo. A small teenager in an oversized pilot's seat. Headset on. Focus Unbroken Air Force Command issued a statement. Ava Morgan's courage represents the finest spirit of aviation. Calm, intelligence, and heart. At her school, she walked through the halls quietly the next week. But the moment she entered class, every student stood and began to clap. She froze. Her teacher simply smiled and said, You don't need to take the aviation exam anymore. You've already passed. That night, she sat by her window, looking out at the stars. She opened a small leather box, her father's flight badge, scratched and faded. The one she'd carried in her backpack since he died. She traced the engraved words, Ghost Hawk 1. Ava smiled faintly, whispering to the night sky. I didn't fly alone. Dad, you were right there. A shooting star cut through the darkness, vanishing over the horizon as if answering. Ava leaned back, eyes closing, the hum of engines echoing softly in her memory. Throttles your heart, yokes your mind, and fear? Fear's your co-pilot. The world called her a hero, but Ava Morgan knew the truth. She was just a daughter who refused to let her father's lessons die at 30,000 feet. And because of that, 212 people saw the sunrise the next morning.